Okay, so here are the parts for the wheels. That gives me the diameter. You're supposed to sandwich those together, but I find it's easier just to use those to get the right diameter. That's 2 pieces of 1/16 balsa, cross-grained and sandwiched. And then I've painted the outside edge where the tires are going to go with a real kind of a dark gray. Use whatever color you really want. Then you have the circular parts that's going to go on the outside and the inside. And there's the gray I used. So here I'm just cutting out one of the little center pieces that goes on the axle side. Just make sure you get it as close as you can, and then very carefully cut it out. Certain things that are large enough, it's nice to have one of those little dudes to spin around. Then I stick a piece of wire through the center so I can line everything up. Add some glue to the little piece of paper and slide it over the wire. And then that way I have it kind of centered. I mean, you still got to sort of eyeball it a little bit and jigger it around a little bit, but that gets you most of the way there, which is good. So slide that over the piece of wire. Takes a few seconds here to get it just right. Well, don't do that. And then that just helps sort of get it started. Touch it a little bit, get it to start to glue, and then you take your fingers and just kind of press it down and get it nice and tight on there. And you just do that to both sides. And just make sure you have an even tire. That piece is going to be painted in a little bit here, but that's the interior side. You can do that to both. And there they are, all done. Now, I'm showing here the start of cutting out these pieces that are going to be the outside edging, or outside wheel cover that would go over, I guess, the spokes. And they're a little bit convex, and so that's why you're cutting out that piece that I'm showing right there. But you got to do this very carefully, and I'll speed this up so you're not falling completely to sleep in a couple seconds here. Here I go. Look at me move. Anyway, you just cut these out very carefully and cut out the centerpiece. And what you notice is you cut out the centerpiece, you can cut out with little tiny cuts, little tiny stabs, and then that cuts out things actually cleaner than trying to take it around like I'm doing with these parts. These parts, it's easy because they're much larger. So with a large circular piece, it's easy. There they go. And now you have to put those together. But what I've noticed is when that piece comes together, you get a huge ridge once they come together. So what I've decided to do, what I find helps, is to sand where those are going to come together to thin out those pieces of paper. So when you do put them together, they're very thin, and when they come together, there's less of a ridge. And if done carefully, I mean, it'll really work well. In my case, I had to do a little filling. But you use the old paintbrush and a fat finger or the heel of your hand to make it into that little conical shape. And then you're going to see where that piece is going to go together. And when I do that, I'm looking at it to see how tight it is, how close it is. It actually looks pretty good. So a little dot of super glue and some kicker there dries it really fast. And now I've generally got the shape I want. And then you sort of fiddle it with your fingers. I can sand the outside to get that seam down even less. And as I sand it, some of the paper gets sanded away. But because you have that solid super glue on the other side, it's fine. And there you go. Now we just put that with a little glue right onto the center. And that's going to be our outside facing part of the wheel. Now, a trick to doing this is once you put some glue around the outside edge, it's kind of hard to get it down exactly where you want it. At least I find it difficult to do. I take that little piece of bamboo and stick it in there, and then that gives me a place to hold it. And then I can center it and get it down just kind of where I want it. Now you press down the edges. In my case, I pressed down a little too much, I think, because I actually crinkled the paper a little bit. Don't do that, because you want to have that conical shape still there. But in any event, it ended up okay. There's one that's done. Now, here's what I was trying to tell you too. There's a little piece that goes on the hub, but it's tiny, tiny. But to cut that out, look what you do. you cut little tiny dabs. You don't try to color around it once. You just sort of perforate all the way around, and it makes it very accurate. And then you can just pop the piece out, and you got a nice little circle. That works surprisingly well. I didn't do that myself. I learned it from a Polish card model site. And there I am sticking that down here, making sure that you cover up that hole, put a little glue in there. Works just fine. And looks good. You do the same thing to the other side. There's a wheel. Looks pretty awesome. And that's what it'll look like when you put it onto the subwing there, and gives you an idea of what you'll be looking at. Good. Now, I've got to paint them. So what I do is I measure how big that hub is, and I cut it out with my little circle cutter from some pieces of that Tamiya tape that are stuck together. And then I take that outside mask and I put it around the tire, and that keeps the tires from getting painted. And then I can paint the interior, my sort of beige, my clear dope linen, like I did with the rest of the airplane, the rest of the fuselage and the wings. Peel that off in the center. Comes off pretty easy. And now you use that outside piece as your mask. And you just carefully put it on, line it up, and now you'll be able to paint that part, that clear dope linen color, with ease. The next part's a little harder, takes some more time, but it's not impossible. But it's masking off the other side where the tire is, which is the conical side. So what you have to do is cut very thin strips. See how thin that is? It's probably, I don't know, a little over a 1/16 of an inch or so. Because it's so thin, though, you can actually grab it with one thumb and kind of turn it and pull it around. So when you put it down and get it started, you can actually kind of tug it and stretch it and turn it in so that it actually follows a curve quite well. This is how I mask a lot of circular things, like de-icing boots on B-24 Liberator rudders and things. Anyway, so there it is, ready to go and painted, and to paint it. And what I did was, I went out. Oh, and this is what I'm trying to go for. See how that has a green on the outside, and then it gets lighter and lighter on the center. That was painted, apparently the Fokker factory. Now here it is, spray painted with my CDL. And what you notice is they look terrible. I got a lot of bumpiness on one of them. The other one I think is a little bit better. But they both didn't turn out the way I had wanted them to. They both look a little ratty. And so, and that's not from the seam itself. It's from when I put it together, I kind of squashed it. So let that be a lesson to you. Be a little more delicate. So what I do is I break out the putty and put a nice dollop on there, and then use my delicate little pinky to sort of squish the stuff around. And I kind of give it a nice swipe on either side to sort of thin it out and have it go over. And I sanded it, went out and repainted it again, and lo and behold, it looks much better. It doesn't have to be perfect because we are going to do this next step, which is taking my little brush, remember, that we had cut to be smaller to about approximately 1/33 of the original thing. Take our paint, and this time instead of making lines, we start from the outside and we start to paint from the outside and then go in. But you do the same thing. You load up the brush, spin it around the outside, and then slowly go in. I practice on the back sides first. What I should have done probably is put this on some kind of a mandrel and actually spin it, and then slowly bring the brush in, almost like it's on a lathe, instead of doing it freehand. As it turned out, it worked okay. But if I ever do it again, I might try that little trick. And I did like I did in the wings and the body. Took a little bit of my ethanol, or my isopropanol, I'm sorry. And before it was dry, sort of spun it around and lightened parts to make it look a little bit better and feather things. Did the same thing with the outside edges, where the conical part is. Put it on the outside and then slowly swirl it into the center. Again, I probably could have done it better, but this is what I did. And I slowly swirled it around to the center And then, and again, if you don't like what you have, you can take it all off, or you can add a little bit. I took a little bit more off with the isopropanol again, just to make it just so. And I think they worked okay. I mean, they probably could have been better. If I really hate them, I guess I could redo them. But overall, not too bad. I think my wings and my body actually worked better, but you can see what I'm trying to do here. Slowly lightening them. And now here they are done. Two things. I think the swirl looks pretty good, but also notice that rear leg strut has been moved back, because when I had it as it was for the original model, it was too close together. Now it looks much, much better.